Hello, friends, and welcome to the Exploring Washington State podcast. My name is Scott Cowan, and I'm the host of the show. Each episode, I have a conversation with an interesting guest who is living in or from Washington State. These are casual conversations with real and interesting people. I think you're going to like the show. So let's jump right in with today's guest. Welcome back to the show. Thanks for listening in. I am with Kelly Goto, who is the daughter of Sam Goto, who is the artist behind the new book, Seattle Samurai. Kelly is the one that is credited with the author. We're going to talk to her about the legacy of her father's work. So Kelly, thank you for sitting down with me today.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Long-winded, intro. You sent me a preview copy of the book. This may set you up and make you go, oh, look at the time I have to go. There was something in it at the very beginning that caught my eye. Your dad would put art onto dental work?
Yes.
I'm sorry. I thought that was so odd, but so cool.
Yeah, I have, my dad had a very subtle sense of humor. And I think he liked to crack himself up. So they didn't necessarily need to be things that anyone else saw. But we have a copywriter friend named Paul, and he was getting his dental work done. And my dad says, well, do you want me to put something on that tooth? And Paul said, well, put my name on it. And so my dad etched very carefully with a microscope my name on his tooth.
Oh my gosh. That's even better.
So, and then there was something else that he did. I can't remember, but it was just to crack himself up. And as an artist who had all these tools and metals and, wax carvings and the ability to etch with the microscope, if you look with microscopes at a lot of the jewelry and things that he put together, you can read little things into it. So he was always putting notes, and just the essence of Dad is pretty much everywhere in this house. He modified everything. I mean, there's just so many stories. So he just had his touch, even if you couldn't see it, pretty much on everything that he worked on.
All right. I mean, the challenge for this is that your father had a long life. We could go back a long ways, and all of that. But with regards to the book, where did you get the idea to put this book together?
I was always going to make some kind of family heirloom book that would just be for our family, called Sam I Am. Mm-hmm. Later finding out I can't even use that name, for a real book for obvious reasons. And it was just because we have so many pieces of art and collections of cartoons and paintings and drawings. And I just wanted to memorialize it in some way. So I always had in my head, even when I was young, this idea that for his 80th birthday, I would put something like this together. And so I was always going to put it together and present it to him as an actual book that he could feel proud of. I, of course, missed the opportunity to do it before he was 80, and he passed when he was almost 85, 2 weeks away from being 85. So it was a natural progression to want to put something together after that, after he passed. And so the book, although it was already in my mind, really became a reality of something that I wanted to put together to memorialize him and also offer some kind of legacy for what he and my mom were trying to do all these years. And I realized at some point that it might be something that people could possibly be interested in if they weren't in our family. So here we are.
Well, how I reached out to you. So let me explain to the audience. So I was looking for books to add to our Explore Washington State bookstore that we have. And I saw this pre-order for Seattle Samurai, and I looked at it and I'm like, oh, this is kind of cool. And, it was kind of a neat idea. The cartoons, my quick reaction to the cartoons was they kind of gave me a Calvin and Hobbes-esque thing. I mean, there's just something and this is kind of, in which Calvin and Hobbes was a perennial favorite for me. And And so I thought, well, this would be great. Let's get the author. Let's see if the author wants to come on the podcast. So I reach out to you. Didn't do no research. And then after I reached out to you, but before you respond, actually, I didn't reach out to you. I reached out to your publisher. And I honestly expected nothing to happen because publishers are, in my experience, notoriously forgetful, slow. They don't care, whatever. Almost immediately, your publisher got back to me and said, "Hey, we passed this on to Kelly. She'll reach out to you when she wants to." Like, wow, that's awesome. And then you reached out to me very quickly. And then I did a little research and realized that, well, you have your own Wikipedia page, which is kind of a weird thing to me that, people have Wikipedia pages, but you have this whole design career going on that we could talk for hours on that too. But I reached out to you about this book, which is this, what's the word I'm looking for? Acknowledgement of your father's and your mother's work through the years. And when we talked on the phone, you went into some detail about how your dad got, he seemed like, this is my interpretation, he seemed like he was a very reserved person, maybe wasn't looking for the spotlight. And so did your mom almost, like, do I dare say, trick him into agreeing to put these into the newspaper? So what I'd like to talk about for a second here is your mom. And I think the audience, folks, you can't see this, but she's laughing. But your mom, and how did she, because there's a backstory here. And so how did she get him to do these comic strips for the paper? And I'll be quiet. I'll let you talk.
Well, there's a lot to unpack there. So first of all, our bookshelves are filled 30 feet high with tons and tons of books. We have a book family, and a lot of them are Calvin and Hobbes, Bill Watterson's books, one of my dad's favorite artists, of course, Charles Schulz, Peanuts, every collection you can possibly imagine. So there is an essence, of course, of Schulz and Watterson, and maybe even going back to the days of Lil Abner and all of those cartoons that my dad grew up with that has pervaded our household for my entire life. So we love cartoons, we love comics. Yes, that I could talk about a lot, but illustrative work in a comic format and storytelling in that way has always been part of my life. So the backstory with my parents, besides the fact that they were partners and collaborators for 56 years, just on so many levels, they talked and discussed and went through their lives looking at different themes that they wanted to approach. And one of those themes fell into my mom's lap when she was just a young mom with two little kids. My sister and I were probably 3 and 6 years old. And my mom got a call from the University of Washington's archives asking if she would help curate and collect the stories of the Issei, which is the first generation Japanese, before they pass on. So this is in 1970. And she said no, she wasn't interested, and that was it. And then she got off the phone, and my dad says, "What was that?" And she told him. He says, "No, I really think you should do it." Now, maybe he thought she should get out of the house more or do something besides being a mom at home. I don't know. She had a nursing degree, but she didn't really like nursing. So she called back and said, "Okay, I'll do it." So my mom became the inadvertent archivist, and these are all on cassette tapes. And she spent the 1970s both interviewing and transcribing, using those foot pedals in the old days with cassette tapes, all these stories of the Issei and that first generation as they came into America. Flash forward, my mom started a program called Amoide, which is living history, at our dining room table, right where I'm sitting right now. If you flip the camera, you'd see the table. And it's 30 years ago, she started a writing group to collect stories. And my dad illustrated these books that were first handmade and printed at Kinko's. And then eventually there were grants, and she's now on her 7th grant or 7th edition of the book that will now be printed this year. And she spent the year collecting stories of those who helped the Japanese Americans. And all these stories are positive, filled with resilience, little snippets of life that have some essence of a message or a moral message or something that we should learn from. So that's really my mom's trajectory and how she's put the last, several decades into this preserving history move. And
Wow.
my dad followed along and provided the illustrations for all the stories and such. The third part of your question was, how did she convince my dad to do the comic books or the comic illustrations for the newspaper? And I'll pause for a minute. Do you want to add anything right now?
I got a question, but we can come back to it because it's about your mother. So I will.
Okay. So just to finish again, because you asked me a few questions in a row.
I did. Sorry.
That's okay. The newspaper, the North American Post, has its ups and downs and has, just as all newspapers have gone through all these years. And they needed to infuse it with something a little more interesting, visually interesting. So my mom thought, Sam's always wanted to do cartoons, and he's always done cartoons, but he would never suggest doing an actual comic strip. And I think my dad had it in him for years and years and years, and all the ideas were in his head, but he was reserved and a little humble and very Japanese. Don't go promoting yourself. So my mom convinced him that if he did the comic strip for the North American Post, that in lieu of payment, they would offer a slot for the Japanese Cultural and Community Center of Washington, JCCCW, an advertising spot that was worth about $500 a month.
Okay.
So in exchange for doing the cartoons, he was in fact donating to the Cultural Center, and that to him justified the creative process. So he started in 2012 with a weekly cartoon, and then that shifted to a bi-weekly cartoon, and he ran that comic strip for 5 years.
Okay. So my question I had was, you mentioned your mother, they approached your mother to interview people. Why her? Why did they pick?
We have no idea.
Okay.
We have no idea why they called her. And maybe there's a backstory there. And I feel like I've asked my mom a couple times, and she thinks maybe that someone got her name because, now she didn't grow up speaking Japanese, but she taught herself Japanese. So she's one of the oldest of the third generation sansei. So both of her parents were born in the United States. Her dad, my grandfather, went to college in Minnesota, University of Minnesota.
Okay.
My grandmother, her mother, was born here. So my mom is one of the sort of self-taught sanseis that had to go back to school to learn Japanese. It wasn't spoken at home. Oh. So I believe that she thinks that someone heard, Dee might have time. Dee speaks Japanese, really poor Japanese, if I might say. She's gotten better over the years, but yeah, I don't know why she actually got the call, but she slotted herself into this role, and she has just carried it through, to this day. So this is what she does.
So when you and your sister were growing up as children, did you learn Japanese at all? Did your mom? And did your dad speak Japanese?
Nihongo wa kaimasen, and that means I don't speak Japanese. So
thank you for translating that.
That is the only thing I can say. We went to language school, my sister and I. We learned katakana and hiragana, which are the symbols. One is romanji, sounds like English rather, but is in Japanese. And the other one are the characters. I just couldn't pick it up. And I have now realized this is, different topic, but I'm very dyslexic. And so I don't know. I just couldn't, once it went into the kanji characters, I couldn't figure it out. I also took it in college and tried to take it during the summers when I came back from college, immersive. And I just couldn't pick it up. I do not know why. Sad. My sister didn't learn. My dad, we believe that he understood, but he never spoke. And then he just said he had a hearing problem as he got older. Okay. And so, he would just hear what he felt like hearing. So my mom, the Japanese that she speaks used to be like, kore wa nan, this is a coffee cup desu ne. Like that. Like we'd be like, gosh, Mom, we understood you. because she would insert all these English words. But I'm finding now that she's engaging in a lot of different conversations with friends that are newly from Japan and other people, that her Japanese is actually pretty good now.
That's very cool. I mean, I just think that, well, I love the fact that your mom took part in and is still working on recording history of people, because I think in today's day and age where we're, glued to our short term, it seems like everything's very short term when we look at our phones. And yes, that's my dog there somewhere on the, wait a second. This is a new setup for me. Sorry. I digress. It's just, I love when people are like archiving and taking effort to record and save things, because I do believe at some point in the future, somebody will find value there.
Yeah, we have a lot of cassette tapes, that's for sure. And well, two things. One, she also was on the board and was present and helped name something that you may have heard of called Densho.
I have heard of that.
And that, and maybe I got the name wrong before with Omoide. Densho, I think, means living history, actually. And that name was coined at our house with some they were students, but they were from Japan. They were older. And they were just talking about what a good name would be for something like this. And it's the archiving of the history. And so they came up with the name Densho, and then she brought it to a board meeting. And Tommy Ketta and other people that were there, Scott Oakey, thought, hey, this is a good name. So they picked it up. And so my mom has kind of been in the background helping push a lot of these initiatives along. And she doesn't always get credit, but she was there. And the same thing with the Japanese Cultural Center. She's been part of the growth and the starting of that all along. But she kind of stays in the background a little bit. We're kind of background people, actually. And yeah, behind the scenes work.
Behind the scenes work. Yes, the heavy lifting, if you will, without getting you're not the front person. I'm looking on the Seattle Samurai website right now, and I'm at the bottom of the page where it shows a photo of your mother. And I can't help but look, and it quit. And as you can see, I'm swiveling my head, so I have my iPad's off camera here, and I'm like looking. And when I quickly glance over, your mother reminds me of my grandmother. And I think it's the facial structure. It's the shape of her face. It is so funny to me. It was like almost kind of unnerving at first when I glanced off camera. So what was her role in putting the book together? Obviously, she got your father to do the initial art, but what has your mom's role been in getting this project to? Well, the book's not released yet, so we can't say completion because it's not out to the public. But we're really close. It's your work is your heavy lifting is done. Well, not really, but what did your mom do here? How did she help?
I list my mom as a collaborator. She was a partner. In the end of the book, I fully tout how she and I worked together on this. So this book is as much hers as it is mine, as it is our family's. Pretty much every 5 minutes, my mom has a bedroom over there and she's on the main floor. And she sits in there and listens to her podcasts, and she's very intellectual. She's very in her head. And I'll just yell, Mom, what was the name of that guy with the giant tomato? And then she'll not hear me pretty much. And then I'll have to walk in there. And then she says, oh, well, actually it was a giant onion and it was Ike Saito. And I go, oh. And so every single story, every caption, initially all the scans, because I was forcing her to help me scan. It was a nightmare scanning these images. She just participated every single moment of every day, and I would just yell at her. And I can't imagine not having that person where you can just quickly ask questions to verify history right at your fingertips. These are things that aren't on Wikipedia. They're not online.
Right.
I can't verify everything. A funny story, though, actually trying to verify one thing led to a completely crazy story. But so my mom was a partner and a collaborator, and she would initially just write out all her thoughts and put them into a notepad and, send it to me. And I would say, Mom, how is this useful? this is not helpful to me at all. And so I would just say stuff like that to her. Like, I need to write the actual book, Mom. And then she would find things in books and show them to me and say, oh, this is when, Grandpa, da 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 da. And because she was there when my dad was drawing all these cartoons, and she knew where the story came from, because it was all in my dad's head. Mm-hmm. It's not like I can look at a cartoon and say, wait, is that a true story or not? So she would reference and show me where each of these stories came from and how they were relevant to either our family or another family that story was being told.
Really? As I'm scanning the book, there's a photograph of your dad drawing with those magnifying goggles that you can wear on your head that make me kind of just get nauseous just looking at the photograph. So I can't imagine how on earth, I don't know how anybody draws like that. I mean, that's just the bottom line. And you said he was using a microscope to etch on teeth, if you will. I'm just looking at this going, the attention to detail, the effort, the people that carve art on grains of rice, that just always escapes me, the technique. But I'm looking at these photos of your dad, and in this one, I hadn't caught this before. So you obviously know because it's in the book, but there's a photo of your dad, and he's bent over at a table. Was he left-handed?
He was right-handed.
So this image is flipped then.
It's probably flipped. Thank you for noticing.
Sorry. I was thinking it was cool he was left-handed because I'm left-handed. I'm like, all right.
It's the black and white one, right?
No, it's a color photo.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah, it's a color photo.
Maybe it is flipped.
But there's there's a Post-it note you superimposed over the picture, and don't wait to be perfect or you'll never begin. And mm-hmm. you made mention that your house has a lot of things, Post-it notes from your dad and things like that. And
it's everywhere. So you said a couple of things, attention to detail and meticulous, and that was true. However, there was an extreme wabi-sabi nature to our household. And wabi-sabi, if you know what that means, is that it's sort of the art of imperfection in a way.
Okay.
And that things don't have to be perfect. It's nature. Nature has its perfection also, but it was just get things done. Don't try and be perfect. It was okay to just get stuff out. So he was pretty loose with his sketches. And sometimes, as you can see, his handwriting is very hard to read. I mean, I wanted to actually superimpose more of his handwriting, and he has notebooks and filled with everything. Cannot read any of it. Just thanks, Dad. And I did clean up some of the stickies because some of the writing was really hard to read. Like I would attach a K, so that it looked like a K. But there's kind of a funny story. I don't know if this tells you what our house is like, but there's these Japanese toilet paper holders that my parents got in Japan probably 20, 30 years ago. And they're extraordinary because they just have these two little flip things. And then you put the toilet paper holder in and that's it. You don't have to take the stupid thing out and the spring falls out. And then you have these two pieces and you're trying to stick it in and you just flip it and it's done.
Okay.
And so they brought these back and I thought, I'm going to install one upstairs because it's still in the box. And so I put it upstairs and found out that today's toilet paper rolls are shorter than probably what was 20 years ago. So it would just fall out. So these little levers, you flip it up, it falls out. So I thought, so I go online and I find the 2-part putty and I get it. And then I putty it and make these little things. And I think, how perfect should I make these little lever extensions that I'm trying to do so that it holds the toilet paper? And in the end, I just go, you know what, screw it. No one's ever going to see it. I'm just going to fingerprint it. My fingerprints are all over it. And I just make these little lever extensions so the toilet paper will stay in. And it works. And I let it dry. And all of a sudden we have this really nifty Japanese toilet paper holder that I don't know why we don't have it in America. It's ridiculous. So I go downstairs into my parents' bathroom and I noticed that my dad had done the exact same thing with the toilet paper holder in my parents' room. My parents, and his fingerprints are all over it. And the putty is like from the dental lab, not the one I bought, 2-part putty. And his fingerprints are all over it. So we had done the exact same thing without knowing it. I just thought that was, I can't explain that story except for to tell you all that detail.
No,
And you
see,
kind of get kind of the whoa a little bit, because it's just kind of half-assed done, but at the same time we were both thinking the same thing. Who cares? Toilet paper,
right.
So it was kind of cool to see that.
I don't know how to follow that up. We just
Two-part epoxy and fingerprints, yeah.
drop the
But
mic.
it's just all over our house. Like right there's a sandbox that he took, a sandbox that we had, my sister had growing up before we moved here on Mercer Island, and he drew these ducks in a whole thing, and then cast it with plaster, and then pulled the plaster out, and it's about 4 feet by almost 2 feet.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's 5 foot by 2 feet. And it's this huge plaque that is on my wall that is embedded into my brain because I dream about it all the time. And it's very cartoony. And it's just this beautiful essence of these 2 duck characters and an egg. And my sister apparently helped print some of the flowers. And we just have it on our wall. And it's kind of this amazing thing. And then just next to it, and I can show you this, there's a plant that has decided to grow in the exact shape of the duck alongside the duck. And we don't understand that. My mom wonders if my dad is somehow manifesting this. Can I show you?
Yeah, please.
So
no one else will see
you,
this, but I will. So, okay.
So can you see?
I can now. Okay. So I'm going to try to describe that. So you're right. It's long and narrow. So I'm going to say 5 foot by 2 foot. I'll work with you on that. And then 2 ducks are looking at an egg. And then there is this plant that is, like you said, it is growing and it is following the back of the duck. I wonder if, okay, I'm wondering as the plant grows, it's resting on the what's the word I'm searching for here? The duck is 3-dimensional, if you will. It's embossed. It's what's not the opposite of embossed. It's and I wonder if it's just using the back of the duck as a resting place to grow on, and it's going that way. But it's
about a foot away from the wall, that plant.
Yeah, it's very interesting.
So it can't use it.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
But isn't that weird?
It is. That is odd.
Like, why is that growing that way? So anyway, those are just the strange things that we have at our house. There's everywhere. I open a drawer and I find another note that says, don't lie about anything, or something. And it's like my dad's spirit is everywhere. And that's really the beauty. I mean, I will tell you, even last week, I started rescanning some art and I found a cartoon that I had never seen before that is not in the book that should have been. It's a samurai cartoon. Really? And I'll make a print of it for someone that wants it. But I also found a box of sayings that has a cartoon on front that I just pulled out of the back room. My mom found it and she showed it to me. And it's just, we're just finding these things and it's just kind of like a treasure hunt. And my dad actually did enjoy going on treasure hunts, and he went on digs. And one of his best friend growing up in high school was Larry Agenbrod, who found for National Geographic the pygmy mammoth. So my dad actually went out to visit Larry and went, full on Indiana Jones with his vest with all his dental tools in it, and started excavating. And so we have a basement, another layer of things, which are fossils and rocks. And I mean, you can't even imagine. Every rock has something written on it, either drawn or sketched, that tells where that rock came from. And then it just goes on and on and on. And he was so interested in the history of the human world and where everything came from and the origins of mankind and all these things. So my dad was just curious. A little bit quirky too.
How has that impacted you?
Well, I don't know exactly how it's impacted me, but I used to say growing up that I have the original bohemian hippie Japanese parents. And without going into detail about how hippie they were, my dad was making no drugs. I'm not talking about anything like that. But they used to walk around, and my dad would make kombucha before kombucha was a thing. He believed in live enzymes. They were making, fermented sauerkraut, and just really healthy. Just really thinking about health and nutrition before it was a thing. They had groups of people come to the house and speak. So we would have guest speakers and, learn how to, self-help and positive affirmations. And so my dad had these books when we were growing up. And I say my dad, but I think it was my mom and dad. But they were $10 books or $20 books. And we would read them and we would get money. And if we learned all the presidents in the United States, for example, maybe in fourth grade, we would get $10. So George Washington, John Adams, Thomas Jefferson, James Madison, James Monroe, John Quincy Adams, Andrew Jackson, Martin Van Buren, William Henry Harrison, John Tyler, James Knox Polk, and just go on. Like, we just had to learn and sort of memorize things that my parents thought would be helpful to us growing up. So I believe that not every kid was doing those things. I don't know.
I certainly didn't memorize the presidents.
Just for one example, but it was a quirky household, and having speakers here practicing all that stuff that they used to do with the house. One time we had a group here, and I accidentally spilled boiling hot water on my foot, and I was like, the silent scream, and I think I was maybe 10, and I went to the bathroom and poured cold water on it, and I took my sock off, and it was just about this big, and I just sat there silently screaming because we had all these people over. And another time I was in the kitchen again, and I choked on something and I couldn't breathe, and so I just Heimlich maneuvered myself using my fist against the counter, and whatever was in my chest popped out. And then again, I didn't want to disturb my parents' meeting. So I just kind of handle these things on the side. So,
oh my God,
very odd. I don't know how to answer that question. I think I'm a little bit quirky, like my family, and I think we're a little bit different than most Japanese Americans for my generation. And I don't know. I haven't cross-compared extensively.
Okay. So one of the questions I had for later, but we're going to kind of bring it up because you mentioned the $10 and $20 books in fourth grade. Somewhere online, I found a reference that you did your first freelance assignment in fifth grade.
Yes.
What was the freelance assignment?
It was my first client for Lou Tice Institute. They were a Seattle-based group that would have these big sort of conventions. People would come in and hear Lou Tice speak.
Wasn't he like a motivational speaker?
Absolutely.
All right.
Yep. And years later, someone came up to me as I was teaching up in Canada and said, "Hi, I work with so-and-so, and you used to work with her for Lou Tice, and she wanted me to say hi." And this was maybe 30 years later, and I just couldn't believe it. Can't remember her name right now. But basically the story there is I decided to learn calligraphy, of which I still do a lot of calligraphy. And my uncle Henry, had the thought, oh, so-and-so's looking for a calligrapher for these events, these Lou Tice events. So he would bring the list home with him because we didn't have email or faxes. And he would drop it off at my dad's office. My dad would bring it home, and then I would pull my first all-nighters. This is how I learned to pull all-nighters, doing the calligraphy for all the names and the name tags. And I would get 50 cents for each of the name tags and $1 for each of the place cards. And there were hundreds of them. Wow. So I was earning a couple $100, $300-$400 a month, every other month, or maybe every month, starting in fifth grade. And that's when I learned, how to invest and how to save, and, how I wanted to think about putting money aside and how much I wanted to have by the time I was 21, and all this, because I was like, I'm going to be an entrepreneur. And I kind of did that, but I don't think I focused on the money as much as I was a little bit more into the creative. But, I still have calligraphy. I'm just showing a notebook right now where I have pens with me, and I just, I love pens and paper, and I love calligraphy. And so it really did start kind of a graphic design career. My daughters are both artists, and they've both taken after my dad in that way. One is more of an illustrator cartoonist from birth, just like my dad. But they have picked up calligraphy. The older one can do it with her eyes closed, and no one can understand how she can letter that way. And so I guess it just goes generationally. And my dad used to do the windows for storefronts and paint signs, and he also drew during his army days. And so he's a sign painter. And I realized over the years that sign painting is truly an art, something I don't know how to do. That I wished I could. People have tried to get me to sign paint, and I now realize I don't have the skill set. But that is something that my dad did, is he was a sign painter and painted windows for the holidays. And we're even now finding photos of him, with windows behind him. And that's one of the ways he met my mom originally. He painted the windows when she was a nurse at the facility, and he was always doing creative things in the background.
Did he have any formal training?
No.
So self-taught.
No, he self-taught from birth almost.
And native ability.
I mean, he literally was drawing from when he was little. Just like I mentioned, my older daughter started drawing cartoons when she was maybe 2. And maybe even honestly 1. I did not understand how I could look at a little sketch she did and see emotion and anger and frustration and joy and like these expressions coming from these little scribbles. And I realized that it wasn't my imagination. She was drawing the expressions into her characters when she was 2, wow, if not earlier than that. And so that's my dad has that same ability.
Wow. As I'm scrolling through the book, and there's a lot to unpack here, and I'm not going to try to unpack the book other than to say, I think, this is beautifully put together from what I can tell, in the sense, just, I get a lot, I talk to a fair amount of authors, and I get a lot of PDFs of their books. Sometimes they're early editions with typos and markouts, and that's fine. I'm just trying to read and get a general gist of it. This is laid out unlike any book I've received to this point from an author. So as a PDF, and I'm looking at how you're presenting it to the market in the, you've got 2 options. You've got the book itself, or you've got a boxed edition, and it's beautiful. Kudos to you. I mean, you've created a beautiful piece of work. It's, it's art. So kudos to you. I think it's a wonderful tribute to your father's life and his cartoon career, which might have only been 5 years, but this book certainly covers way more than that. It's really, honestly, it's overwhelming in a good way. In a good way. It's like there's so much here. I want to talk to you about the specifics of the book project, though. And this is, I like to ask, and you're an entrepreneur, so I think you're going to get this question. If not, we'll have technical difficulties and you'll disconnect. But what didn't go right? Like no project ever goes from inception to completion without something coming up that you didn't foresee. And I got to guess that something happened here with the book somewhere along the line, good or temporarily not good.
That's a good question. First of all, I want to say that I did have a partner in crime who was a designer named Baha, and he is a old soul, like-minded artist like my dad who has fully participated in this process from day one and helped put the comps together and the initial concepts. And so he is the behind the scenes, layout person and helped me finish the book and move it to production. He has a print background and also has done books before. So the pure hell of production, he took on and helped me get the book to a finish. And without him, this wouldn't be a project. Now, that said, I did inject all the design and layout in my really controlling way, and I did lay the book out so many times. And when you're saying that it's overwhelming in a good way, it was overwhelming in a bad way. And I think that was the hardest thing to do, is because a friend of mine, when I first told her about the book project, said, Kelly, I love you, but you're trying to do too much. You're trying to talk about Japanese American history. You're trying to tell your dad's story. You're trying to introduce your dad's philosophy and also his cartoons. And I think it's too much. I don't think you should try and attack all that all at once. And I understood that and thought it would be a Charles Schulz Peanuts anthology where you would have an intro to a section. First, you'd have an intro to the book, then you'd have an intro to the section like immigration. And then you'd have all the cartoons with nothing on it, maybe a caption here or there. That's it. And then you have another section called Early Settlers. And then you go on and then you have all these drawings and then you have it. So basically, I would just have to write one intro to each of these sections. Or Wendy Takuda, who was going to help me write, maybe she could do this. So what ended up happening is because it was like a giant jigsaw puzzle of taking these few hundred cartoons in the end. And I will tell you that there are left and right panels that don't match. My dad drew the right panels separately than the left panels. So we have 72 left panels and I want to say 400, but I think there was only 250 or something of the right panels. And I had to both figure out how those went together and also trying to figure out then how to card sort or organize them into themes that were translatable to book chapters. Okay. And I could go into detail into why that was a nightmare and how each round of trying this would take me 100 hours and a season and Christmas and New Year's and no sleep. And then to get to the end of that thought process and realize it didn't work. That was really the hardest part. And it wasn't until October of last year, I was supposed to go away with a group of friends from high school. We had this weekend planned and I didn't feel good, but I also just couldn't finish this book. And I stayed back and I didn't go on this trip. And I had this epiphany of organization around this character, Samurai Shigeru, and what he stood for. And I started looking at the philosophy behind it, the Bushido code, and understanding that this thread from Japan to who we are in this fourth and fifth generation of Japanese Americans today is this honor and respect and this credo that maybe we've carried through all these generations, starting from early Japan. There's a whole history there. And maybe this was a way to organize the book and it wasn't themed the way I thought it would be. And so I reorganized it. I did the timeline that's in the book now. I actually did it that weekend. And I introduced these characters, these Shigeru characters, starting with the original Shigeru. That is the premise of the book. And then my dad's birth name is Shigeru. And then we have Shigeru Tomo, that's the protagonist. And then you have Samurai Shigeru, which is his alter ego. And I just put this all together and all of a sudden it sort of made more sense to me. And I know that's a lot for this recording and maybe it's too much to explain, but putting the themes together in a way that resonated with all of what I was trying to do was the hardest part. And it was hell.
Okay. When authors work with publishers, they send it to the editor, and sometimes the editing process is extremely painful. Sometimes, what was the editing when you handed this off to new eyes to look at it? How did that process go for you?
Well, one thing that I've learned, people say, "Oh, is this self-published?" And I say, "Well, actually, it's through Chin Music Press." And I have had the fortune of having publishers in my life. My first book was a book by New Writers, part of Pearson Publishing, and they're a big publisher in sort of textbooks and things like that. Mm-hmm. So I had the fortune of understanding what it meant to have a technical editor, a developmental editor, someone that was proofing and, just sort of eyes on it at different levels. And I already sort of knew that not one person was going to catch everything. So Michael Nolan, who was my editor 25 years ago, when I wrote my first book, became my editor, not just the developmental editor, but kind of a copy editor for this book. Then I have a couple friends who just have an eye and a knack for looking at things. And one of them, her name is Carol Hunter. She's an amazing writer. She was more of a developmental editor. Reading it, does this make sense? Is there a theme that you can carry through? And there were people that I trusted that actually read through the text that I had written, or read through like certain chapters that I had written, just to tell me, does anyone care about this? Is this interesting at all? And then there's sort of a tone and voice thing and all this stuff. So looking at everything, the editorial process, by the time that I sent it out for proofing, I had gone through all of that other versions and tone and, is it my dad? Is it Sam? Is it my father? Is it like, how do I say his name? Making sure that it's not all about, well, my dad and dad did this and dad did that, but my father said this, or is it in my voice? And I remember growing up and my sister and I would sit and, so I went through drafts and drafts and drafts, all in different voices and tones and everything. And by the time it actually got proofed, it was pretty tight. And the hard part there is going through what is called CMOS style, which is Chicago Manual of Style, where there's just a ton of commas, which I don't understand why there's so many commas, but there's a lot of commas in there. And there's just a certain way of using numbers, for instance, if it's under, 10, spell it out. If it's over. So there's just all this nuance of consistency that I do remember from my first book. Oh my God. But that process of going through it, and every time I looked at it, I would find another thing. And I'm quite sure that if I open the book to another page now, I'll probably find something, even though it's printed. We went through over and over and over, and I sent it out over and over and over, and I would still find stuff. And then this is the last thing that happened. We sent review copies out, which is just a paperback version or digital print. Mm-hmm. So it's printed. And someone who is a trusted friend, Lori Matsukawa, who also had written her own books, and she's kind of a known entity here in the Seattle area. She took it home, and my mom apparently told her, if she has any thoughts, let us know. And Lori drives over with the book, and this is as I'm sending it to the printer, full of, I kid you not, no less than 50 stickies in there, where she had gone through and copy edited the whole book, found all these errors, things that you can't find from a grammar perspective, but things that are incorrect from a Japanese history perspective, and flagged everything. So I actually didn't know she was doing that. Didn't know my mom. She says that mom asked her to do that. And mom said, I didn't ask her to, but she took it upon herself to copy edit the whole book. And I thank her so much for it. And I was able to get all those changes in, and then delay the submission to the printer by 2 days, and get those edits in the last second. So for sure, there's more errors in the book.
Oh my gosh.
But that was amazing that she took the time to do that. And yeah, it was a process for sure.
Wow. Yeah. Okay. I think you win the editing hell award of guests on the show so far. Yikes. Are you excited about the book being released? Are you excited about going and doing so for example, I saw you're scheduled, I think, in November at Village Books. And are you looking forward to a book tour?
Well, you asked me two questions. The first is, am I excited that the book's out?
Yes.
And yes, I'm very excited, and I can't believe it's done. And thank God. And there's kind of a, just this massive relief that it's printed. There's a few things that I changed the last minute that I wish I hadn't. And there's some things that people won't know about that I hit myself in the head and lose sleep over, that are in the book, this current version. No huge mistakes, but just layout things that I can't believe I didn't catch, or something like that. So those things exist. But overall, it turned out the way that I envisioned. And that was hard also, just picking the paper, the printers and the brokers and the people that I worked with, and even my layout and design partner, all told me to go on glossy paper. And I chose to stick with my guns and go on a flat matte paper. And no one believed me, but I did it. And I'm really glad I stuck to my guns, because I think it adds to the elegance of the book. But just that printing process, and kind of following through an analog way with the way that you touch and feel the thickness of the paper, the color of the binding, the lay flat pages, the way I did the cover, all that kind of stuff. So it's done, and it's as I expected, and I can't believe it. So that part is just huge sigh of relief. And just the fact that we have an artifact that commemorates all this history and art makes me very happy. Am I looking forward to the book tour? Well, I speak and teach a lot for my business, and I don't know that I always look forward to it. I'm not like, I love connecting with people, and I love educating people, and I love teaching. I don't love huge groups, talking to huge groups, but I do it. So I'm looking forward to connecting with people and introducing people to these stories. And I'm really interested if people connect to it the way that I'm hoping they will. And if they do, it'll be something that I wasn't expecting, and something really joyful and maybe prideful. Like, I'll be so happy that it does connect, but I don't know yet. So I am very nervous about going mainstream, which means outside of my family. My family loves it. Of course they do. Outside even the Japanese community, Village Books is in Bellingham, and it's not a typical Japanese American place, and and just the fact that you contacted me. And Bruce, by the way, my publisher, doesn't always get back to people right away. He doesn't. He is a typical publisher. He's on the move. He's in Japan. The fact that he got your message and sent it to me almost the same day was kind of a miracle. That means everything to me. If it can connect outside the Japanese community and outside my family, I'll be so happy. I don't expect it, but I'm hopeful that it will happen.
Besides Village Books, do you have any other? Are you doing something at, say, Third Place Books in Seattle? Where else have you, or do you have anything set up at this point?
I love Third Place Books. I forgot. I think you mentioned it. Elliott Bay Bookstore. I'm doing a book reading on Thursday, the 24th. Island Books, which is October.
Okay.
October 24th, 7 o'clock. Elliott Bay Bookstore.
There we go.
There's no registration page, so I have no idea how many people might come, but I'm excited for that because I think, I grew up sitting on the floor going through books at Elliott Bay Bookstore, and also, just all through Seattle. I mean, comic books and everything. I just grew up walking through the streets of Seattle and reading books pretty much one a day. I'm also doing an opening event at Island Books on Mercer Island on Wednesday, the 23rd. And that's going to be drinks and appetizers and a little book reading. I just met with the owner today to start that promotion process. I'm doing, it's not a private event, but we can't have too many people. I accidentally did an Eventbrite and put it up for 30 seconds and 2 people registered. I was like, whoa, I didn't expect that. We're doing kind of a non-private event, but I have to first send it out to friends, and family and people that I want to thank at the Wing Luke Museum on Saturday, November 2nd. That's going to be a fully catered event. And that is kind of limited audience. So I'll put that out soon. There's other book places. There's also bookstores, some on the east side. And then I did want to get to Portland, but I haven't heard back from Powell's or anything. And I don't expect to, but it's always, like I said, thrilling when it's outside the main, my community, more mainstream. If the book can hit a tiny, tiny, tiny bit of mainstream, that makes me happy. And then I have a series of events at cultural centers through the West Coast that take me through the end of the year. And so as a book tour, I think it's kind of cool because I didn't do a book tour for my first book. It literally, the day that we were going to have the book opening and the party, and my mom was flying down for that book, was September 11th, 2001. So we canceled it that day. And I never did end up having an event for my first book. And I don't know that it helps me sell like a ton of books, but I am excited to connect with potential readers and talk about the book. And even this conversation is just really special. So yeah, thank you.
the idea to me, well, this is just the way I'm thinking. I'm not saying I'm correct, but this is the way I'm thinking. But the West Coast, from Vancouver down to Los Angeles, has a fairly large Japanese population still, and because my interpretation is many landed on the west side of the United States. They migrated east some, but a lot of people stayed on the west side of the coast. Are you going to be doing anything like in the Bay Area or LA? I mean, even though it's Seattle Samurai, I still think is the cultural centers. I mean, or am I just completely wrong?
Well, I do have an event scheduled in San Francisco on October 19th. That was before the due date of the book came out. So hopefully we'll have books in hand. They're literally shipped by boat, and they're literally on their way, and they're supposed to arrive in the next 2 weeks. And so I was just reaching out to my printer broker today to say, hey, can I get an update on where the boat is?
Oh my gosh.
So I am going to be in San Francisco on the 19th for an event. It is through a cultural center, though. And then I am going to be in LA at the Japanese American National Museum on December 1st. And that's going to be a really great event because people are going to be starting their holiday shopping. It's going to be kind of, my mom and I are both going down, and we're going to be speaking. And the Japanese American National Museum has just a really great curated bookstore and a catalog that is national. And so we'll get some really great reach that way. Because I have a day job, which is running my company, and also I'm a solo mom, very happy doing it, but my time is somewhat limited. So I have not booked a lot of East Coast I've been asked, are you going to go to Chicago or New York or even Arizona where friends of mine live? And the answer is, maybe, and even Hawaii, I've reached out there, but it's for fun. It's somewhat promotional. It is, I guess, promotional, but I don't know that I have to do all those,
Okay.
It's kind of a lot for a book tour. I don't know when a book tour makes sense financially if you're, paying your way and flying all over the place versus promotionally. So I'll be running some numbers and I'll see what makes sense, but I'm pretty happy with the lineup that we have so far.
Okay. I'm looking for the I'll say quote. This is something I've seen how you describe yourself on multiple things, and I'm not finding all of it right now, but it says, and I'm reading off of your website. Now a sandwich mom living in Seattle with her mom, 2 daughters, and a new Bernedoodle puppy who I met earlier. I think the phrase was something like a sandwich mom living in a sushi world or something like that.
Right.
How did you come up with that?
I was asked to write an article for a design magazine, Design Management Institute, and I had this idea. I just came up with that title, and I thought, shoot, this needs to be an article because I said, so you know what a sandwich mom is, right? It's when you have kids that are younger kids, usually preteens, and then you also are living in the same household as an older parent.
It makes sense. Okay, got it. All right.
Right. And so they call us sandwich moms. And a lot of these are also, women or parents that have decided to have kids later in life or are lucky enough to have kids later in life. And so, we're tired and we're trying to balance a lot. We don't have a lot of energy. We're just barely making it through the day. But, the sushi world aspect was just throwing it in because obviously I'm Japanese. And so came up with that title and then wrote the article. And there is an article online. It was in the public randomly. It wasn't really even supposed to be in this journal, but they decided to run it in a journal, which means it's behind a paid wall, which was stupid. So I asked them if we could publish it because it's just a silly article. And so now it's actually available. You can read about it, but it just talks about how day in the life during COVID and balancing all these things, trying to work and losing my glasses. My dog was chewing my glasses. That's where I found them. I couldn't see what I was doing. And then the rice cooker goes off in the background as I'm trying to present to a couple hundred people live. And I don't know if you know the Zarashi rice cookers, but they play this huge melody that goes on for forever. And it's playing in the background. And I just think, oh my God, this is what's happening right now. This is my life. And that's what the article is about. So it's pretty funny.
That's
Very day in the life.
That's awesome. You mentioned energy, which I'm going to use as a segue to questions I always ask my guests. Number one, coffee. Where is a great place for coffee in your area? Well, you're drinking coffee right now, but
I am. It's bad. Yeah. Oh, it's not quite. It's noon. I'm okay. I usually allow myself coffee until 2.
okay. So when you're out and about, not drinking coffee at home because, I don't know. Oh, well, actually, let me ask you this. What type of coffee are you drinking today?
Well, sadly, this is a K-cup, Keurig K-cup. Got to keep it simple.
Yeah.
But I have gone through coffee searches and grinding beans, and I have a hand grinder, and I have an electronic grinder, and I have a gold filter, and I have a custom drip filter, and I have different types of beans, and I go through phases. And I almost did it yesterday where I just go through the grocery store and try and smell it through that hole and think, oh, this is going to be the perfect smooth cup that I've always been waiting for. And I buy that $20 bag and I bring it home and I grind it, and I don't like the cup of coffee that comes out. So it's been a trial and error process. And I remember when my dad was going through hospice, and he had an interview. Actually, my publisher interviewed him for the North American Post. It was a special edition of the paper, and they came to the house right before. It was the day after Thanksgiving, 2017. They took pictures, interviewed him. A lot of the pictures of the workplace that are in the book are by Kimmy Rutledge, who's Bruce Rutledge's, who's my publisher. His daughter was here taking pictures. Anyway, my dad then went into the hospital that next day, and then he passed 3 weeks later. So it went very quickly, and it was actually quite beautiful and peaceful in the end because it was Christmas and New Year's, and our whole family was here. And there couldn't have been a better timing for everything too, in terms of spending the time and kind of that peacefulness that happens when the snow falls Christmas Day, and just that beauty of having kids around for Christmas and decorating the tree. And it was sad, but it was kind of this heartfelt thing. And my mom had their anniversary, and so they had their last anniversary together also that week. But every single day, one of my friends, Tara, would text me and she'd say, "How are you doing today?" And I would say, "I can't get my cup of coffee right. I just can't get my cup of coffee right. I am trying to get my coffee right every single day." She would text me and I would complain about my coffee not being right and not being able to grind it. And she says, I think we're talking about something else here. I think coffee is a metaphor for something else. So I don't know if it is life or what, but are we all searching for a perfect cup of coffee and the perfect way to make it and the perfect temperature to brew it and the grind? And are we not quite finding it? I don't know. But Phil's Coffee with a Z in San Francisco, that used to be my favorite place. And they would custom grind it and they would make it so that it dripped. And they would, you'd sit there and wait, and they have 4 baristas across. And I would just add a touch of chocolate. And of course, they would just put whipping cream in it. Duh, it's going to be delicious. So Phil's Coffee with a Z is my absolute go-to ambrosia. And then I think I mentioned this to you, but I took a business class flight to South Korea, and 14-hour flight, utter bliss, just had kids, thought I was on vacation. It was fantastic for a client. And they literally come out and they have a Bose headset and you have your lay flat bed and your big screen TV. And they bring out all these different coffees, probably 3, and you smell them and you pick one and they grind it. And I was like, oh my God, I'm never going to get coffee like this again. I never have. But was it the moment and everything else that was part of that experience? I don't know. And so recently, I go to Woods Coffee whenever I'm in Bellevue. Bellevue Square, I go to Woods, and my daughters know that that's my preferred place. I don't know if it's anything but not Starbucks. And, I don't know if it's better. I just go there because I think it's going to be a little bit different. And yeah, I am still in my search for the perfect cup of coffee.
When you go to Woods, what's your typical order?
A double wet cappuccino, 12 ounce, I think. I'm not sure
Okay.
because they do ounces differently.
Right.
I always get the ounce size wrong. I'm like, medium, the medium one. They're like,
Medium.
oh, you need a 22 ounce or whatever. So whatever the medium is. And I
Okay.
say basically a foamy latte. And because I have to kind of get it right. Like if I'm in New Zealand and they have flat white and,
Mm-hmm.
you get all confused. But basically, I want it to be rich with a little bit of half and half or something in there to
Okay.
make it creamy.
Okay.
So I found that a wet cap is as close to what I can request that gets me there.
Okay. I always ask the question of lunch in the area. So in the Bellevue area, Mercer Island area, where's a great place for lunch?
Well, my go-to couple things. One is I try and eat healthy, and I also love sushi. And so there's Sushi Joya that's on the island, and I have a salmon salad, which is totally simple salad with salmon sashimi on top and a very light dressing that I put on the side. And it is fresh and healthy and delicious and probably $22, which is kind of pricey, but it's perfect. It's a perfect lunch.
I will say that
And yeah,
$22 is kind of pricey, but have you priced anything else lately? It's not that pricey nowadays.
yeah, like you end up getting there no matter what. And then I always tip
Exactly.
higher if it's just me. And
Right.
so that's definitely a treat. And then there is a place called Sano Cafe where again I try and eat healthy, but there's Buddha bowls and all that typical organic healthy stuff. Very expensive, but delicious. And my favorite is when they have soup. Every time I go, I say, "What is your soup?" And they're usually like, "We're out today." It makes me sad. But my favorite would be like a really simple, organic, delicious salad with some really healthy soup. But there are a couple places that have just opened. One is Alistair's, and I've been there now recently twice. And I will say that if you want traditional fair food, very expensive, but I do not fault restaurants for their food prices because, as we all know, food prices are very expensive, especially all the organic and good quality stuff.
Yes.
Really great selection there. Alistair's just opened 2 weeks ago, I think, or maybe 3 weeks ago now.
And you've been
And it
there
is,
twice already.
I have, and I had to sit at the counter both times because I couldn't get in, make reservations, and that was okay. Um, and it was just, yeah, I mean, it was a great experience. I had the
Right.
best, and I don't drink very often, but I had the best whiskey sour that I've ever had in my whole life there. They make it with black tea syrup, just a touch of black tea syrup with a very light whiskey sour. I asked for it not to be too sweet, and he said, I just have to put a little bit of this black tea syrup in. And I said, okay. And it was, I'll
Interesting.
go back. It was the best. If I'm going to
Interesting.
have a drink, I will go
Okay.
back there.
All right. So as we wrap this up, respectful of your time, number one, I have two questions left for you. The catch-all question is, what didn't I bring up that we should have talked about? That's the
The
interviewer's cheat, just put it on the guest.
you know the only thing that I have noticed as I've kind of been both asking myself these questions, and I've gone through a couple interviews now, I have realized that the gist of the cartoons and the focus of my parents' storytelling efforts and collection of history is on the everyday experience
Mm-hmm.
and living our values through our everyday interactions with people and places and how we handle ourselves in situations on the bus. Or it's not just dealing with the incarceration or how we dealt in a very resilient way, which is huge. But it's not just that moment in time that makes us. And when I say us, it could be any culture, any ethnic group that has gone through the process of becoming American. So it's any story that you have really is an important thing to somehow write down and understand why certain stories get passed through the generations. And these are simple experiences of everyday living. And that's, I believe, what my dad was trying to do and why it is very Calvin and Hobbes. And peanuts oriented, because these are everyday experiences and how we carry our values and maybe our morality and maybe our humility and questioning, like, are we doing the right thing? These are what we deal with every single day. And I believe that's what my dad was trying to convey in these cartoons.
Okay. All right. Last question. I prepped you for this by warning you that I wouldn't tell you what the question was, right? And that you have to answer it. That's not negotiable. And you have to give us your reason why. Okay. You ready?
Okay.
Cake or pie?
Definitely pie.
Why?
I love crust. I love crumbly crust. I love the fact that pie, you can make it delicious without it being too sweet. I do not like sweet things. I am not a sugar fiend.
Okay.
I am a salt fiend.
Okay.
And so pie, you can almost always get, and not always, but those sicky sweet ones that it's too syrupy and all that. Do not like those. I love fresh. My Auntie Beryl makes this most amazing strawberry rhubarb pie that my daughter and I love, and my daughter asked for her birthday. Like, we are pie people. There's blackberries all over our house. It's finally, the season is passing in this week almost, but we usually pick blackberries and make blackberry pie. Not too sweet, a little bit of whipping cream maybe. So fresh fruit is delicious.
Okay. See, that wasn't so bad. Some people, though, it'd be like asking, okay, which of your children do you prefer? I mean, it's like, it's like,
can't answer that.
Yeah, I can't. Some people, it's so funny because some people just get just really like, I've asked them the impossible. And I stole this question from somebody. It was an episode I recorded that the audio didn't work out for. And so I can't give the person really great credit. But I thought, what a cool question. This is just, it's like, there's no wrong answer. There is no wrong answer, but you have to answer. And I've had some people, why come both? No, you got to pick, and then I always like to find out what in your case, strawberry rhubarb, and the backstory. Why? What's the thing? It's always about family. My grandmother made this, or my mother made this, or my father did this, whatever. It's family.
Yeah, it's true. And with the cake question, it just goes on and on and on, because I've tried to make cakes, and I made a heffalump cake for my one daughter that turned out great, but it was so sweet we couldn't even eat it, but it looked great. So if you're going to decorate cakes, then cakes are great because you can decorate them and be all artsy and you can put like graphics on top of it, and that's all nice. But if you're going to eat a cake, the ones that I like are the really super light ones with fruit in it, which brings me back to pie. Yeah.
All right. Well, Kelly, thank you so much for sitting down with me today. Or actually, we're not together, but we're both sitting down. And thank you. And I appreciate your time. And I'm really excited to see the book hit the local. Well, Wenatchee, you're probably not going to be in the only bookstore in Wenatchee because it's just this tiny little phone booth sized little store. So probably not going to be there. But when I get to Seattle, I'll definitely be looking for it at Third Place or at Elliott Bay, which is Third Place anyway. They're all owned by the same people now. So I'm really looking forward to seeing it in the wild, if you will. So thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. And I am going to ask for your address because I will send you. I have the actual printed books now since I spoke to you last, and I will send you a copy.
Well, thank you very much for that. Hope you enjoyed the show. You can reach me on Twitter at ExploreWaState. I'd love to hear your comments. You can also visit our website at explorewashingtonstate.com. If you know anyone who would like the show, it'd be amazing if you'd share the show with them. This is the biggest way that we grow this show. Good old word of mouth. I'm glad you were here with me today, and I hope to have you listening to the next episode. See you then.